Well, here we are. I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for saying yes to being on the Self-Love is a Practice podcast series. We're here today with someone who's very special to me, my dear cousin, Turner Francis-Snellgrove. And I especially invited you here, Turner, because your story has been so inspiring for me. And, you know, everything happens in divine timing because I know we had planned to record this earlier. And I'm so happy that this episode is coming out this week when we have a new moon today, the 18th of March in Pisces. And then at the end of this week, at the 21st of March, we have the equinox. And for me, the equinox is when the new year really starts because we're in spring. It's all about new beginnings and clearing out and planting seeds into fresh soil. And so there's no better way to enter this conversation than about nutrition. I have just completed a 5-day cleanse and I feel great. I'm often asked about why do I do these cleanses. I do them 2 to 3 times a year, mainly to clear out what's happening here. And so there's an interconnectedness in what's happening in our minds as well as what's happening in our bodies. And there's nothing that impacts that more than how we're feeding ourselves. So thank you for being here. And I'm excited for you to share your story with this audience. And so I think the first thing I really want to ask you is, and I know we've spoken about this a million times, but what led you on this trajectory?
Right. Anyway, before I get into that, I just want to thank you so much for inviting me for this collaboration.
Absolutely.
It was been so long, well overdue. We've spoken about this for ages. But as they say, nothing happens before the time.
Exactly.
So my journey, my foodie journey, it's been such a long journey. It goes back a few decades now. And I think, you know, being someone as a child in the 60s, in those days, there was very, very, it's kind of hard to say because whilst back in those days, things were very simple. Everything basically was organic because we weren't living in this fast-paced world. We used to consume everything that was considered slow food. But technology wasn't as where it is now. And as they say, one man's food is another man's poison. Not because it is particularly wrong, but there are just a few of us that are just wired differently, DNA-wise, etc. And for me, in my late 20s to early 30s, I started to have a lot of sort of health issues, congestion, nasal issues, constantly on antibiotics. And this is me living in a hot country. So there's no winter, but constantly having a cold and stomach issues. And it just didn't make sense. And I actually started to go to doctors because obviously you think the first place to go is there's something really, wrong with you. And I went to a doctor and I remember the doctor said to me, "You've got ulcers." And I was like, really? I remember people who had ulcers in those days, they're normally people who are alcoholic or, old people. And I thought, or stressed, people with stress. In those days, I had no stress. My life, I was carefree, living my life and enjoying sunshine. And well, I didn't really do much about it because I just didn't take it on board. And then I traveled to London, met with my brother for dinner, who was always plant-based. I'm not saying that plant-based is the thing, but he's always been that way virtually all his life. We went out for dinner. I got talking to the person who we were with. And the lady said to me, she's a biologist, and she said to me, "You might want to consider looking at plant-based options." And she specifically spoke about dairy. And I never heard anyone, this lady was actually vegan. And in those days, people never even said they were vegan. They normally said they were vegetarian. So me being me, I was very, very curious, and I decided to go back to Jamaica and sort of explore what she said to me. And the penny dropped that I never forget when Burger King was a thing in those days. I went to Burger King and had a milkshake. And after that milkshake, I was virtually on the floor. That's how painful this milkshake was. I was in cramps. I was just like, and I thought, you're feeling this way because you've drank milk. And then it dawned on me, my diet was very, very dairy laden. I used to have lots of cheese in everything. I used to put cheese in callaloo. I used to put cheese in rice, just about everything. And that's when I worked out that I was what we call lactose intolerant, but obviously very, very severe. I decided to give up lactose. I just went radical. I just decided I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't want to have eczema anymore. My skin used to people look at me now and they say, oh, your skin is so beautiful. And I'm thinking, you have no idea. I was not probably born. I was like programmed to have such terrible skin because of the way I was eating. And I kid you not, within 2 weeks, all my eczema cleared up and it was severe. And then I moved to, cutting out the bits, but I moved countries a few times and ended up in Dubai. And it was when...
I'm going to press pause right there because you have said so much that I wish to comment on and that I want our listeners to pay attention to. It's very interesting what you shared, Turner, because I remember the times when we both lived in Europe and we would have discussions about various food things. And just to give our listeners some context, Turner and I were separated for many, many years. And then suddenly we were back together and we realized we had the same likes, we had the same dislikes in terms of food, and we almost had the same physiological reaction to food. This is when we're early on the path and we're kind of trying to figure out what's going on here. And I remember seeing someone in Jamaica, what we would call a functional doctor nowadays. Those days we called him an herbalist. And he said to me, he said, Nadine, you are eating well, but not for your constitution. Now, in those days, for me living in Europe, you living in Europe, it would be yogurt and granola and berries and all of these things. And then I recognized that whenever I came to Jamaica, if I had a plate of callaloo and saltfish, let us say 2 green banana and piece of yellow yam, I was perfectly fine throughout the day. I had no energy dips, no bloatedness, no indigestion. And I remember someone telling me in Brussels, believe it or not, a naturopath, because like you, I used to have what they call IBS and all of these things. And I remember that doctor saying to me, when your stomach or your digestion is off, return to the foods that are indigenous to you. I remember that. So I just wanted to make that point because it's many of us, and it's something you and I have spoken about, Turner, as well as with doctors. Nutritionist. There's no cookie cutter formula for anyone to eat to nourish themselves. And so, like Turner shared, because she was paying attention to herself, she realized she had new information from this person in England. She has this milkshake, bam, awareness. So everything begins with a shift in awareness. So I just wanted to highlight that. Yes, please go ahead, T.
Yes. So basically, I mean, I had to put that into context to show the whole journey of, sometimes how long it takes for the penny to drop.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I moved to the Middle East in the early 2000s, and in those days, I never forgot when gluten-free bread was only sold in a pharmacy in the middle. Yes, it was a pharmacy. Yes, wow. And I remember. You go to the pharmacy, there's no warning. You don't know if the shipment's coming. And you go there, and the minute it lands in the pharmacy, you got all these mothers who have a lot of times on their hands. They go in there, they buy like six loaves at a time. And this bread was awful. It was absolutely dreadful bread. But you couldn't eat it unless it was toasted. Anyway, and I thought, there's got to be something better to life, you know. You shouldn't have to go to the pharmacy just to buy gluten-free bread, because I'm also, I didn't mention that, I also found out that I was gluten intolerant. And it seems like my light bulb moments happen when I travel for some reason. There's things that I observe and I notice. I was in London years later, when obviously London is always ahead when it comes on to, like, you know, free from food, as we call it. And I bought coconut yogurt at the, what was that?
I says, I remember that. I remember the discovery of the coconut yogurt.
Yes, it was at the equivalent of the UK's, at the time, Whole Foods. And I was blown away because I have not had yogurt for like decades. I was so excited. And that's the one thing you can't really travel with, or else I would have stocked up and put them in my suitcase to have some, you know, to along the way. When I went back to Dubai, I thought, it can't be that difficult to make your own coconut yogurt. How can it be?
I
Yeah.
remember.
And I had in my kitchen a piece of kitchen appliance that had a setting on it for yogurt. And I always wondered, why did this Excalibur dehydrator have a yogurt setting? I thought it never made sense. I bought it because I was experimenting with raw food. And then when I looked up the process for making yogurt, I realized that you needed to introduce heat when you put the starters in there. And that's why there's a yogurt setting on this piece of machinery. So I thought, right. I come from Jamaica, where we eat coconut water, coconut meat, coconut milk to make things. I thought, and it made sense because coconut yogurt is very creamy. And I went on a mission. I still had my job working in the bank, and I decided to start playing around with making coconut yogurt. And I literally was in shock. I was like, what? The outcome was amazing. And I thought, this is too good. I have to share this. I just thought, it's like a secret, and only I'm the only person that knows about it. And you want to go out and shout about it. So then I discovered that.
Interrupt you for just one moment. So, for those of you that know me in the capacity of a coach and a wisdom mentor, Turner has shared incredibly, just right there, what happens when we move from JOB to JOY. So, she had a story, her first person story, that grew her curiosity, that deepened into a passion. And while she had her full-time job as a banker, she continued to then explore this passion, which was benefiting her. So for those of us that say we want to change life, if you want to change something, you have to change something, and you start right where you are. Sorry to interrupt, T, but it was important for me to make that point.
Oh, makes perfect sense. So then I discovered there was a farmers market movement that had just started, very, very new. And I remember when everything seems like a discovery, and it's like a sort of like, you know, you're excited. And I remember the Saturday morning, I was in bed with Pete, and I said, oh my goodness, they've got a farmers market now in Dubai. And I literally jumped out of my bed and said, I'm going down to the garden center to check out this farmers market to see what it's about. And the farmers market was just taking off, and they were about to change locations to a bigger venue, and they were looking for new vendors. And I decided, didn't even have a clue, no plan. I thought, I am going to get myself a table at this farmers market and promote this coconut yogurt. I was making this yogurt in the kitchen of my house. And I set up, I just had this one product, which was coconut yogurt. I used to go to the market after work, to the wholesale market, to buy stacks and stacks of coconut. We used to take out the coconut meat, you know, whatever, made the coconut yogurts. And, you know, in those days, we never had ChatGPT. There was no, you had to really craft if you wanted to achieve anything. And luckily for me, and this brand that I created in Dubai would not have existed if it wasn't for another family member as well. I had a cousin who lived in Dubai who was at the top of his game in branding. And I had a meeting with him and I said to him, I want a logo. And that is what gave birth to a brand called Coco Yogo in Dubai, which was 2012.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I went to the market with just these yogurts. And all I did was came up with 5 flavors and decided to test them. And people just didn't understand the concept because it was still very new. And I would make little samples of containers and just hand them out to people for them to taste.
Wow, wow. And therein began the story. So before we talk about the rebirth of Coco Yogo into something or someone else, I'd love to ask you, you know that one of my mantras is self-love is a practice. And I feel that I feel and I know that anything that we desire for ourselves, from work to family to you name it, it begins in how we feel about ourselves. And so, what I want to ask you in this context is when you hear self love and how we nurture and nourish ourselves, what does that bring up for you? What does that bring up for you? What does it look like for you?
Well, now, when it comes on to food and self-love, as we say, we talk about holistic living and holistic lifestyle. And people always say you feel it in your gut, and there's never a truer word.
Yep.
And if you slow down and listen to yourself, and as you said before, there's no cookie cutter way to, how you should eat or whatever, because we are all very individual people with a different set of, the way that we're made up. But for me, self-love means it's slowing down and taking time to appreciate and understand what serves me best in terms of what I eat. And it's not always listening to the food noise, because food noise is loud and it will always sometimes overtake the desire for something, So for instance, you and I, we're big travelers. We're always traveling. We're always going somewhere. And it's very easy to fall into that trap of, I'm hungry, I'm just going to grab what's available. And one of the worst places for that is in an airport. And you have to make that decision. You have to plan. It's about forward planning. And it's just like, I look at us, especially us as women of color. We invest a lot of money with our hair. We spend a lot of time in the hairdresser. We spend hours in the hairdresser. We spend a lot of money and time on our nails. And sometimes I feel like what we put in our bodies is like on the back burner. And self-love, it's about everything, how you show up, how you look, how you feel. And in order for me to feel good about myself, I have to pay a lot of attention to what I eat. And this might be more sort of significant for me because I have food sensitivities. So where the average person can just grab something and it's okay for them, I have to make a lot of effort. It takes a bit more time, but with planning and a little bit of intention and mindfulness, I'm able to look after myself to get the best outcome.
Yes, wow, that was a powerful statement. You said so much there. And here is the thing, and there is an episode on self-love and beauty that comes in the next season, but self-love is really an inside job, whether it's in thought, whether it's in food. And if we want to beam on the outside, then we have to look at what we are ingesting in our thought as well as through our mouths. So thank you so much for saying that. And you're right. You know, so many of us were paying attention to the exterior. We want to look good because we live in a society where so many decisions are based on what you look like on the exterior. But what is really the paradigm shift or the superpower when you walk into a space? I see it happen so many times when you and I walk down the street anywhere in the world, Turner. And it's because you're beaming from the inside out, which really comes from pure, wholesome living, you know? So, it might sound airy-fairy or abstract for those of us that are going, well, what are you really talking about? It's as simple as, do you get in the morning and do you drink a Pepsi or do you have a glass of room temperature water? And it's the tiny steps that start to make the difference. What many of you may or may not know is that as a young adult, I weighed nearly 200 pounds. And I remember when I first moved to Canada, my guardian at the time, she was into Fit for Life, and she introduced me to Fit for Life. I've never done a single diet in my life, but what Fit for Life did was that it gave me an awareness to what I was eating, food combining and timing, and I kind of more live along those principles. So really, it begins with daily tiny steps. If you want to bring awareness to, well, what you're really eating, keep a food diary. We run around, I'm sure there are 15 apps that we can tap into that can help us with that. And then you start to observe, as Turner shared at the beginning, how your body feels when you eat certain things. And then you go through a process of elimination, which is why cleanses are so important. The body takes, I'm not a nutritionist, but the body takes a lot of time to process food and energies. And so if you just leave your digestive system a little bit light, notice what happens to your energy, notice what happens to your thoughts, notice what happens to your productivity. Wow, time is moving, and I want to keep our listeners engaged. Now, one thing you have the PhD on is intentionality and presentation. You and I talk about this as well. I can't just eat a plate of food because I'm hungry and the plate of food in front of me. Food has to be aesthetically pleasing for me, which takes us to your new product and your new brand, which I just love everything that you do. And yes, she's my cousin, and yes, I'm biased, but yes, she makes the best and desserts in the world, bar none. When you taste these desserts, if I put a non-vegan and vegan side by side, a quality non-vegan, I might add, you can't tell the difference. I've said a lot. I just wanted you to talk about, you know, the art of food, also why it's important that we make our food look beautiful when we're going to eat it, that we're not just shoving, you know, things because it's on a plate.
So this is actually, as you said, this is one of the things that really excites me about food. It's not about just, for me, it's not about just, I'm not saying every day I do this. There's days when I feel completely like, I can't be asked, I can't be bothered. But, you know, and you've been a guest at my house many times. I love the way food looks on a plate. Funny enough, you spoke about a food diary, and here it is. I actually authored a food diary, which covers some of the things you just spoke about.
Fantastic.
And in this journal, we speak about presentation and color. And, you know, all of that encompassed together with the surroundings, you know, even for yourself. And it goes back to your previous question about self-love. That is all part of it as well. You're not going to do it every day, but sometimes you just feel like, I'm going to eat my food in my best plate. We all have very nice things tucked away. I remember my mother, she had piles and piles of beautiful crockery and stuff like that. And I'm a firm believer that you put on a bit of makeup or you put on some nice clothes, and it's even down to your food, the type of cup that you drink out. I see you drinking your self-love mug. Sometimes you want to drink your herbal tea, but you put it in a very nice cup. You put the salad on your plate. Like just yesterday, I haven't posted the pictures yet. I made a beautiful salad, and it was very intentional because the colors in the salad, it was like, when you're picking your clothes out to go out and you decide what color glasses am I going to wear with this outfit. You go to buy the peppers. You don't have to buy all green peppers. You buy one red, one green, one yellow, because when you put that in your salad, it's going to make it pop. And if I'm going to choose a restaurant, I know I actually click to see what the decor looks like. I know it might sound like I'm going, over the top, but it's all part of how it makes you feel at the end. And you might not realize because you don't practice that, but once you start to do it, you realize that food in itself brings joy. It's an experience. And that is why now restaurants and hotels are now not just offering food, they are offering experiences.
And so when we talk about experiences, we're talking about how do we want something to feel? And this is where the somatic piece, the body piece comes in. Everything begins and starts with the body. I hope you're now starting to see the interconnectedness of all things. Self-love is in every single aspect of whatever it is that we're doing. And so in a world where, everything is available to us, ultimately, you want to know, how do you want to feel? How do you want to feel in your relationship? How do you want to feel at work? How do you want to feel in your clothes? How do you want to feel in your gut? And so that is a key point, the experience piece, because that's really what we're here on earth creating beautiful memories. And how do we do that? Through lived experiences. It really is as simple as that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's amazing how sometimes we don't even realize what it is that gives you that feel good factor. But you go somewhere and you walk into a room that smells nice, and you see people going, oh, that's so nice, and suddenly it changes your mood. And you know, food, well-being, feelings, etc., experiences are all intertwined.
Absolutely.
And one without the other, it makes a difference.
Of course, of course. So time is going super quickly, and I have one last big question for you. Well, I think I'm going to have to do this into two. So I'd love for you to share with us where you are now, what you're creating, and how people may access you. And I will have that at the end as well, that they can access you.
Okay. So right now, I've gone from Coco Yoga in Dubai to Boho Vegano in Tulum. Boho Vegano is home-based. I create a combination of things. So my number one star thing that I do is the creation of plant-based desserts from a range of cheesecakes that are fermented with cashews. I make the latest addition is my frozen Snicker bars.
So
it's a whole range that I
here.
And you have not yet tried it, so that's going to have to be next on the cards when we meet again, right? So yes, so I do custom made as well, so people can order these desserts from me, and I also combine this with workshops as well. So I'm back to doing my plant-based workshops. I've just hosted 2 in the last couple of weeks. And that's where the journey is right now. And there are some other things that I'm sort of exploring. Because as you know, when you go to a new country, it takes time for things to, you plant a seed, you have to work out which sort of avenue you're going to take, what works best for that audience, because not every location is the same. And that's also something that you have to consider when you're doing a business. And especially for us who are in this sort of well-being sort of arena, um, there's just different things that resonate with different people in different places at different times. And right now, I think Tulum is very ready for what I do, and I'm embracing it and going with the flow.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that, Turner. And you just made a key point. Listen, there are so many gems in this podcast. What you said about paying attention to the times, particularly for those of us that are in the business of wellness, because things are constantly shifting and evolving and changing. And so there's a strong intuitive piece with us keeping our ears on the ground, the heart, the gut, the third eye, all of those working so that we can really show up and say, well, how do we really serve? What is required of us now? What is it that people really want? One of the things I find is that with everybody's nervous systems out of whack because we're moving way too fast, we really want to be offering experiences that allow people to completely slow down. And we can do that, as you said, through integrating a whole range of things. My last question to you is, where does one begin? And I guess there are different layers, whether you're at the kindergarten layer or the PhD layer, and no one is better than the other one. But if you could give somebody 3 tips today as to how to really open themselves to developing a loving relationship with themselves and what they're eating, what would you say to them?
Funny enough, I spoke about this in the food journal, and it's a big umbrella. It's a very, very big umbrella, and all these things are like pillars that fall underneath it. And mindfulness, it's a training that you have to do within yourself. And as you said, it's from within. And within this mindfulness, it's just like when you're walking, you might not realize that you're doing it, but you have to decide which foot is going to go forward first.
Hello, wisdom from my cousin. Which foot you put first? Yes, my girl, one preach.
So it's the choices that you make, right? And you have to prioritize, like, what you're going to put into your body. So, for instance, you go to the supermarket, whether it's once a week I'm one of these people that don't bulk buy. I like to go frequently. You have to prioritize your whole foods, because the truth is 10 of the aisles in the supermarket are probably not important. So if you find yourself spending a lot of time in certain aisles, you're in the wrong place. You need to set yourself in the right lane. It's like you're driving on the highway. Do you want to be in the fast lane, the middle lane, or the slow lane? In the supermarket, there's only a couple of lanes that are really, to me, I think, are valuable to you if you want to practice, loving yourself or treating yourself better. Look for the whole foods. Look for the things where the healthy oils are, because those are the things that I think a lot of us just make the big mistake. Yes, corn oil is super cheap, palm oils, but unfortunately, those are the worst oils for you. So find yourself looking for your cold pressed, because those are the ones that you want to be putting on your dressings. So make little adjustments like that. Also, another thing that I find is very important is you have to pay attention to your labels as well. Because,
yes,
this is, and I feel almost, one of the things that I feel so strongly about is like it's a con, it's a scam. There are many scams out there. And I think there's big scams in the food industry. You buy something like a chocolate, for instance, and it says chocolate. Is it really a chocolate? Flip it over. The first ingredient, it says is sugar. The first ingredient is normally what is the highest content in that food. So you're not really buying a chocolate bar, you're buying a sugar bar. Because it's 10% chocolate and probably 70% sugar. So there's no one saying there's anything wrong with a chocolate. Look at the labels, understand the brands that care, and make your choices that way. So I've got two there. Now, what could be the third one? Basically, don't forget that food and movement go together.
That's a whole
And
nother
in as
podcast
much,
just opened up, but go ahead. Yes.
yes. So I find that whenever I have a program for moving, I eat better. It's like my brain somehow tells me that I've invested, it's an investment I've made. I've just gone to the Pilates class or the yoga class or the spin class, or I made the effort to get up early. So why would I do all of this and not make what I eat a priority? So I think by combining these three little tweaks, it sort of is like the umbrella for you moving forward to making it's baby steps. But I think it's part of what the practice needs to be in order for us to achieve this level of wellness.
Wow. Turner, you and I could be here forever. Thank you so much for the privilege. Thank you so much for sharing your story with our listeners. I'm sure we'll have quite a few questions. And I'm going to put my cousin on the spot by saying, stay tuned to the retreat experience with Boho Vegano and Universal Empress. You can't
And can I say
Yes.
one more thing before we go?
Yes.
It's my favorite food quote of all time. It says, pay the farmer now and your doctor later.
There you go. Pay the farmer now and the doctor later. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Turner. And here we are. Self-love is a practice. This is Universal Empress Nadine McNeil, changing lives one breath at a time. Thank you so much.